Hello. Hey guys, what's up? We'll start in some time. Can we please sort of introduce ourselves until I start my introduction? जिन्होंने भी join किया है YouTube chat पे please mention your name, your degree and the college you're coming
Hello.
from.
Hey guys.
ऐसे बढ़िया. Hello, hey Kiran. Vishal. Your name is Blogger. That's a nice name. Others also, I see like more people on the stream. Can you please sort of introduce yourself? So, what are we going to learn today? We are going to understand what data science is, what are the different jobs in data science, and how can we sort of make ourselves ready to crack any data science role in the industry, whether it is at Google, at Facebook, or Capgemini, whichever company you're targeting. I'm going to talk about what's the process and how did I get a job into ICICI Bank as a data analyst. So, yeah, can you guys introduce ourselves? We'll start in next 2 minutes. Hey Sonal, good to meet you. You just completed your BE in CSE. That's a good branch to be in to sort of pursue a career in FSD or data science. So yeah, you have a good start. Okay, guys, let's get started. Let me just present my screen. So let me know if you're able to see the screen. Please type a yes in the chat. So let me start with what we are going to cover today in this particular session. So we'll start with what data science is and how to crack data science jobs. Then a lot of you might have used ChatGPT, right? So it is one of the generative AI technologies. Now, what is generative AI? We are going to discuss about that and how you can fast track your learning using generative AI. So earlier people used to think that, कोडिंग मेरे बस का नहीं है, राइट? एंड मैं भी ऐसा ही सोचता था, सो आई सेड लाइक आई स्टार्टेड एज अ डेटा एनालिस्ट, राइट? And I always had that enthusiasm in me that I want to learn new things. But whenever I went to Google and I tried learning some new language, probably to create a website or something of that sort, it always used to be like यार बहुत सीखना है, मेरे से हो नहीं पा रहा है, and errors आ रहे थे, तो I couldn't sort of figure out कि कैसे इसको solve किया जाए, right? Because वो errors are first dependent on the OS that you are working on, and it is very sort of customized, मतलब as the sort of software keeps updating, the error and its resolution keeps updating. So it was a lot of issue if you just went to Stack Overflow or online to sort of solve your issue, right? So there were a lot of hindrances in sort of learning anything new, any new software, any new programming language. Well, all that is gone. ChatGPT and other such tools, which we'll talk about, help you solve a lot of these issues really fast, and your learning pace really gets, multifold increased, right? So that's what we are going to cover majorly. I'll show you some of the applications that I have built, some of the applications that you can also build. You can design websites and things like that, right? But all of that is pretty advanced, right? Before you get into generative AI and its application, it's very important for you to understand what is the base of all this, which is data science, machine learning. So we'll do that first and then move on to the rest of the demonstrations that I'm going to talk about. So, a quick introduction about myself. I sort of graduated from IIT Bombay in 2016, and I did an internship at Deloitte, which was my first internship. Not first internship, but second or third internship, and that was the first internship I did in data science, right? And since then, I have been in data science, right? So I worked at ICICI Bank in the data science and analytics group, which is the group that sort of gives you, which gives the analytics to the whole of ICICI Bank, right? And can someone just put in the chat how many people must be there in the data science and analytics group at ICICI Bank? Put up a number there. How many do you feel? It's 10, 20, 100, 200, 300, 1,000. What do you guys feel? So while you sort of put things into the chat, I'll just talk about what else I sort of worked on, right? So I was handling the phone banking analytics. So phone banking is like, every day there are more than 5,000 people who are sort of telecalling, right? And how most of them are sort of on contract, right? So how do you manage how many people you need every day? Because it's very dynamic. Suppose there is a festival season that's coming up, and someone is not able to transact, right? And they will definitely give you a call at phone banking. But if your phone banking is busy, then the person will use some other credit card to do the transaction, and hence you lose revenue. So how do you sort of manage how many people you need every day, every shift is very important. Apart from that, analyzing what sort of issues are coming in, doing text mining, doing analytical processing, natural language processing, to understand how many queries are coming, what type of queries are coming, what is the type of resolution, what is the tat. So doing all that analysis and how to improve the whole process, that was one of the important things I was involved for. I was the Spock for, right? And apart from that, I also sort of worked on a lot of instruments that ICICI Bank had, right? Personal loans and home loans, developing their approval model. So whenever you go on ICICI Bank and you apply for a loan, it doesn't get approved right away. There is a backend model that runs and sort of decides what sort of people does it want to give the loan to, right? So that is something, the model that is there. We have to give regular reporting to Reserve Bank of India and things like that. So I was involved in that too, right? And post that I moved to Upgrad, and I've been here for quite some time, right? And I've been handling the whole of data vertical at upgrad. So any program that upgrad gives, I'm the one who sort of designs, my team designs it, I give an approval and see which type of people can take up which type of program. So we'll talk about that, what's going to help you and what's going to sort of help you get a job in this data science industry. Perfect. So let's move on. Let's start with the first thing. What is data science? So I think this slide that you can see on the screen, this Venn diagram, I would say, is something that really well summarizes what data science is. So obviously, when you talk about data science, it's part of it, it's a combination of two words. One is data and the other is science. So definitely data is going to be there, right? And what do we understand by science? So science of data, and how do we do that science? So let's take an example. I was talking about uh, credit card approval or any loan approval, right? So this industry has been going on for like what 100 years, right? And in those 100 years, do you think data science or maths was used, right, like 100 years ago? So I'll just give you an answer. Yes, it was being used, right? So people had those calculations. What type of people are good? What type of people give you the loan back when you lend them some money, right? So they had an understanding. So there was certain domain knowledge that the people who used to give loans had, right? That a person with a good background can be given a loan and they can sort of return it back, right? A person from a particular pin code where the average salary is good, those sort of people can sort of give you the loan back. They won't default on your loan. So all that thing is sort of known as the domain knowledge. So people who have the right domain knowledge are the right people to own the product and decide whom to give the loan, right? So this is how things were going on before the data science era. People used to sort of just do calculations and see that okay, this sort of people is giving me the loan correctly. These are the right people to give the loan, and they are the ones who sort of return you the loan in the right amount of time with the interest and everything. So there was a certain set mindset ki yeah, this sort of people will sort of give loan to. But then what happened is there were a lot of people. Take for example now, a lot of people may feel that for small and medium enterprises, people who have their small shops or who are farmers, you can't really sort of know whether they'll give you the loan back, right? So there was this sort of issue that was coming up that your base was getting dried up, and to see if people apart from the ones whom you thought can be good customers, you weren't able to really decide whether you should give a loan to those guys or not, right? And that is where data science came in. So you could build models and see whether, which are known as propensity models, which essentially mean that if you give a loan to a person, if you offer a loan to a person, not give a loan. So I sort of tell you that, let's say Sonal, I tell you that I want to give you a loan, right? So I'm proposing that you are eligible for a loan. So there is one sort of model which sort of decides that if I'm offering a loan to someone, whether that person is interested in taking it up or not, and whether that person will convert or not. That is one sort of model that could be built. The other type of model is if the person, for example, Sonal has taken up the loan, right, and is currently paying back the EMIs in time. What is the chance that that person, Sonal, will default or not, right? So there were various such models that got built, and basis that they were able to expand their customer base, right? So the second thing that came in was modeling, which are sort of built on top of mathematics and statistics. So you can see the first thing that is there is domain knowledge, right? Let me just use a marker, right? So the first thing that I talked about is definitely data, because data science is all about data. The second thing is about the domain knowledge, because people who have the domain knowledge were running the industry. The third thing is you built models to sort of expand your customer base and decide, apart from your understanding, who else is a good customer who will buy and who will not default, right? So that's the third thing. Now, what happened is all of these calculations that you do you think, if you have like millions of people and you have to decide among them whom to give loan and all that, will you do all the calculations by hand? So it's really difficult actually to do all those calculations by hand. And that is where computer programming came in, and hence computer science. And within that, all these models sort of became machine learning and AI models, right? So the first thing is that there is data, then there is domain knowledge, because domain knowledge is required to understand what sort of products you want to build and whom to pitch. And then to sort of ensure that you do not get losses, you have the good quality customers and you're able to retain those customers, you apply mathematics, statistics, build models, and to automate those models so that it can run on your quantum of database. India has like what, more than 1 billion population, right? 1.6 billion, 1.4 something billion population. If you have to run, do calculations such a huge base, you need programming, and that is where computer science, machine learning comes in. So it is a multidisciplinary field, right, of domain knowledge, mathematics, statistics, and computer engineering. So that's why I said, Sonal, since you are from computer science background, you have a good background to get started with. Let's move on. We'll now try to understand what sort of uh, uh, problems and how are problems solved in the industry. So any problem that's there in the industry, right? Do you think it directly comes, for example, I'm a data science professional. So do you think that I come up and say that, "Oh, okay, I want to build a propensity model"? How many of you feel that that's the case? Please reply. Please sort of put a yes in chat and a no in chat if you feel that a data scientist decides what sort of models, what sort of problems one has to solve. So what I'm trying to say is, if I'm a data scientist, I'll anyway go to office and say that I want to build a propensity model. I want to build a model that gives approvals. Is that how industry works? Okay. So, yes, the thing is, that's not how usually things work, right? So, any sort of company that's there, right? Any business that's there, they work on two major things. One is either you have profits or you have higher revenue, right? Or you have both, right? You have higher revenue as well as profits, right? So, businesses work on these two major fundamental things, right? And whatever can be done to either increase profits or to increase revenue, you will it will come from the business to any other team, whether it's sales team, whether it's tech team, whether it's data science team. And that is what happens here. Let's take an example. So I was working in the bank, right? And there is a credit card department. And what was happening is the credit card department sort of uh, was facing losses, right? And it was increasing month on month. So, what they decided is, why not work on reducing these losses? So, this is what I'm trying to tell you, that the first thing that is there is that the business, which is the credit card department, says that my losses are pretty high and now I need to reduce these losses. So, the credit card department comes to the data science team and tells what can be done to sort of reduce the losses, right? So this is how the conversation starts for any data science problem. Until now, we haven't yet reached what a data science problem is, but we have just figured out that the business problem is my losses are pretty high in the credit card department and I need to reduce this. Are you guys understanding that the first step is business problem understanding, that what is the business problem and what we are trying to solve? Please write a yes. if you understand. Okay, so let's move on. So now we have figured out what the business problem is. Now there is a business team, there is a data science team, and now we are discussing what are the different ways we can solve this problem. So first we try to identify what are the different sources of losses, right? So let's say that the business team gave some data and did some data crunching, and then got to know that losses are probably because of three to four main reasons, right? So they have their own domain knowledge, right? So what they felt is, one is definitely that people are sort of not paying back, they are defaulting on the payments. The second thing which they felt is probably the number of customers are not increasing, and that means that the marketing is not very targeted. That can be one of the reasons. The second reason could probably be that the marketing is not well, and that is one of the reasons the customers are not coming in. The second reason could be that the features of the credit card is not well. Even though you're targeting the right customers, your credit card features are not very great, so people are not opting for your credit card. And the third thing could be that you have some features in your credit card, like free book my show tickets, or probably free launch access, but people are just using it for that. They're not using it for the rest of the transactions. They're not using it for paying for food bills, or paying for internet, or doing shopping or things like that. And hence, you're just paying for those good features that you are giving to the customers, and they're not using the credit card somewhere else, right? There are multiple reasons that come up, but let's just talk about what is the business model of a credit card, right? So whenever you swipe a credit card, there is a 4% transaction charge that the merchant pays. So for example, you go to Shopper Stop and you sort of swipe your credit card. If you paid like 100 rupees, 96 rupees goes to the merchant, 4% goes to the bank and the payment network, which is either Visa or MasterCard, right? Out of that 4%, roughly 2% goes to the bank, right? So the business model of credit card is, if someone is not using your credit card and just using for the features like book my show or launch access, then you're not getting revenue. That 2% of revenue that you could have gotten on rest of the transaction, suppose I spend like 10 lakhs in a year, that's roughly 20,000 of revenue that a credit card can sort of come from, can get from my transactions. That is not happening. So every credit card department wants to have the customer use their credit card for all transaction that that customer does, and hence that can be one of the issues, that the customer is not doing using that credit card for that, but for all the transactions he or she is just using for the freebies that you're giving, and hence you're generating those losses. So what we have figured out is there are multiple reasons for the business problem, which is the losses that you're getting. One is probably the the sort of people are defaulting. Then the your marketing spends are not very targeted. Second, even if they are very targeted, your customers are not sticky. They are using your credit card only for very few transactions, which are freebies, for the freebies that you give. And there was a fourth reason that came up, was there are a lot of frauds, right? So let's say I was using my credit card in some restaurant or some other place, and my credit card sort of got, captured somehow. Either someone took an image, or someone sort of just captured in the machine. There was a case where, there was a machine that someone put in the ATM machine, and anyone who sort of was transacting, all their data was getting captured in that machine. So such frauds happen, right? So that is probably one of the reasons, right? So what we did was analyzed what is the sort of amount of losses that are coming in these reasons, because of these reasons. What we felt is fraud is one of the major contributor of losses. So what we have done is, we had an initial business problem, which was that the credit card is facing losses. Then we figured out what are the different problems that could have led to those losses. That is the second step. And then we figured out that fraud is one of the major contributors. So now you can see that how we have solved a business problem to further smaller business problem, and narrowed it down to fraud. Now the next question comes in: how do we tackle fraud, right? So there are two ways of tackling fraud, right? So we have understood that we have to tackle fraud. We have boiled down to tackling fraud. Now there are two ways of tackling fraud. One is fraud हो गया, ठीक है? We have seen that 1 लाख 2 लाख 20 लाख का fraud हो गया ये month में. Now we analyze कि ये कौन से पिन कोड से fraud हो रहा है, कौन से POS machine से हो रहा है. POS machine is point of sale machine जहाँ पे we transact, और वी सी वेयर द ट्रांजैक्शन वेबसाइट पे कोई वेबसाइट पे फ्रॉड हो रहा है क्या. So we feel, find out do different such analysis and try to figure out which sort of things are major contributor of fraud. But you can see here that all this analysis, which is data analytics that we are doing post the fraud has happened. So essentially, you're already facing those losses, and then you're analyzing how did those losses come in. So that is one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is essentially you build a model, right, that is able to detect a fraud transaction while it is happening and then rejects the fraud transaction. So you might have seen कि जब भी आप ट्रांजैक्ट कर रहे होते हो वेबसाइट पे या कहीं भी, तो हमेशा वो 3-4 सेकंड तो मिनिमम लगता ही है वो ट्रांजैक्ट होने में. So what happens in the back end is, if the transaction is a fraud transaction, it gets checked at the back end on the bank server. तो उसी में एक तो approve होता है transaction, and within that approval there is a fraud model that runs in the bank server. And if it detects a fraud, your transaction gets rejected. At times, what I've seen is I was doing a transaction of like 1 lakh in the night, and my transaction got rejected, and I got a call directly from ICICI Bank that your transaction, are you the one who is doing the transaction, and they verify and then approve the transaction. Especially it happens when you're sort of doing this transaction on a international website, right? So there are certain checks that are there, certain models that are running, and people are there on standby to verify whether you are the one who is doing the transaction or not. So there the fraud model is running right at the real time, right? So two ways of solving it. One is post ad hoc analysis. Once the frauds have happened, you analyze that. And the second is build a model that sort of detects in real time and does not let the fraud happen. Which of these do you think is sort of the most best way of sort of tackling this particular fraud problem? So one is please type one if it is for post ad hoc analysis, and two if it is for what do you say, building a model, right? So I hope most of you sort of feel that it is obviously building a model, because you're not letting fraud happen, you're saving money, right? You're not letting fraud happen in the first way, you're letting the fraud happen and then doing post ad hoc analysis, because of which in future the fraud will not happen, right? So that is not a good method. The second method is obviously the right method, and that is what we decided on, that will build a fraud model, right, which will sort of help us tackle fraud, right? So until now, what all did we do? We had a business problem, reducing losses. Then we figured out what are the different contributors to that business problem, and then we figured out fraud is the major contributor, and then we figured out two ways of solving it, and then we boiled down to the actual data science problem, which is building a fraud model, right? So all this work that is done here, this is majorly done by a business analyst. So that is one of the first roles in data science. Cool. Let's move ahead. Now, the second thing is you'll see that there are a lot of data points that are present, right? Whenever you fill your form for a credit card application, you are filling it either going at this sort of data. Sorry, you are either filling it at the branch, or you're filling it online. So there is data captured there. Then there is data of the customer's savings bank account. Then there is credit score data. Various such data points are there at different such databases. Now, if a person has to do analysis, if it is present in Excel sheet, SQL databases, no SQL databases, cloud, it sort of becomes difficult for anyone to sort of figure out how many languages that person has to understand. That person needs to be good with SQL, they need to be good with Excel, they need to be good with big data, and getting such a person is really difficult, right? So that is where there is a role of data engineer that comes in, who is specialized in understanding all these languages, right, and getting data from all those sources to one particular source. That one particular source can be a NoSQL database, can be a SQL database, or Hadoop, or whatever, right? So there comes the data engineer role, who sort of works here in the data and understanding part, who gets data from all these different sources into one source. Now, how does this help? That is the very basic question that you guys will have. That helps because now, if a data analyst has to work on it, or a data scientist has to work on it, he or she has data at one place, and he or she does not have to learn a lot of other languages, a lot of other querying techniques to get data. So, are you guys understanding what is the role of a data engineer? Please type a yes in the chat. Okay, perfect. So now that you understand what a data engineer is and what is the role of a data engineer, that is the second role we discussed. Let's come to a data analyst. So a data analyst is a person who sort of fetches data from this one database. Let's say in SQL there is data of all the different sources that the data engineer has put in. This particular guy, a data analyst, sort of gets all the data from this particular SQL database and analyzes that data, does exploratory data analysis on it. So he or she tries to understand what type of customers are sort of getting defrauded the most, what sort of pin codes are there where the transactions are going on, what sort of POS machines are the ones which are faulty. So there was an issue which we found out that a particular set of POS machines in Thailand were sort of doing a lot of fraud transactions, and that is something that we sort of could understand, that pin code is one of the things we could analyze, right? Then we could see what is the average sort of value of transactions which are usually fraud. So if you do a transaction of like 1 lakh or 2 lakh, anyone would detect a fraud. As opposed to if you do multiple transactions of 2000 each, it gets difficult to detect, right? So that is something that, analysis you do here, a data analyst does all those analyses, and then sort of gives those analysis to the business, that okay, see, I have identified all this, do you have anything to input into this? So the business will come up with their own understanding of, credit card department, and give you some understanding of, what is the sort of uh, uh, you know what other reasons might be there, what other data points should one analyze to sort of figure out, what is the uh, cause of fraud transactions. So all this helps in sort of figuring out what are the causes, what all features you need to analyze, what all features you need to work on, and that is what a data analyst does. So he or she analyzes and generates features, delivers it to business, discusses with them, generates further more features which can be used for modeling. So uh, now what we have figured out is we have data, we have generated features that can be used for modeling. A lot of you may not understand what features is, so let me just give you a bit of understanding. So any all of you must have learned linear regression, right? एक equation होता है y is equal to m1 x1 plus m2 x2 plus m3 x3. इस तरीके का एक इक्वेशन होता है. इसमें जो x1 x2 x3 होता है, इसको हम फीचर्स बोलते हैं, एंड इनके ही ऊपर वी बिल्ड अ मॉडल, राइट? सो व्हेन यू बिल्ड अ मॉडल, बस तीन चार फीचर पे तुम बिल्ड नहीं करते हो, तुम ऐसे 100 150 फीचर्स बिल्ड करते हो. मैंने कुछ कुछ मॉडल्स, द वंस दैट आई बिल्ट इन माय टेन्योर एट आईसीआईसीआई बैंक, दे हैड लाइक 250 features plus, right? And then you decide which all features are most important, and then you use them in the final model, and things like that happen. So all of that you do in model building process. You sort of generate a lot of features which a data analyst might have given you. The business would have told you, the credit card business people who own the PNL. So using all of it, you generate a lot of features, build a different types of models, and that is what you do here. Now let's move on to the next step. So once you have sort of built and tried multiple different models, you have to decide that one model that the bank will run in real time, right? So all of that happens in the evaluation and testing phase, where you sort of compare the performance on various metrics like accuracy, latency, how fast is the model, is the model able to explain things properly or not? Because the business would want to understand, if someone is being tagged as a fraud, why is that person being tagged as a fraud? Or if a transaction is tagged as fraud and being declined, why is that fraud transaction declined? Right? Not fraud transaction declined. Why is that transaction tagged as fraud in real time? Because this is a very important issue. If I am a very premium customer and I sort of am doing a transaction of like probably 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs. And if my transaction gets declined for 2 to 3 times, I will stop using that credit card. So there is a chance that you may lose a customer if you wrongly tag any transaction as fraud. So hence explainability is very important for explaining if any transaction is fraud or not. Is the model able to sort of explain that really well or not? Right? So that is the evaluation and testing phase, and the last phase is deployment. So remember, I talked about the POS transaction that was happening, and in the backend there is a bank server that's having these transactions which are getting detected by the model whether it's fraud or not. So that model has to run like within 1 or 2 seconds, right? So it's very difficult to sort of have that infrastructure and design a model that runs so fast. And that is what you sort of work as a machine learning engineer in deployment. You try to understand what is the system that the particular bank has. Then you try to understand how do you convert your model. So data scientists usually work in Python, right? Python or Spark. Now, how do you convert that model into the language that is there, that is fast? For example, Golang is really fast. So how do you convert a Python model to a Golang model? And how do you deploy that and integrate it with the existing machine, that existing server that's there? Right. So all of that happens in this deployment phase, and that is done by the machine learning engineer. Right. So what all did we discuss? We discussed that there is business analyst role, then there is a data engineer role who gets data from all places. There is data analyst who analyzes data, creates features, and then there is data scientist who sort of uses all the features that the data analyst has created and builds model and decides which is the best model. Now data scientist does not work on real time models. They sort of build models in isolation on their laptop or something of that sort, right? And then comes the machine learning engineer who takes up the model that the data scientist builds and then sort of deploys it, right? So this is what is there in the whole of data science industry. You sort of start with a business problem, you have multiple roles: business analyst, data scientist, machine learning engineer, and data engineer, right? And as you know, business analyst requires the least amount of coding, data analyst requires a little more, data scientist requires a lot of modeling experience, data engineer requires a lot of coding, and machine learning engineer requires almost an understanding of everything, right? From data engineering to data scientist, what the data scientist does, because he or she has to understand the whole process, the whole model that's there, the whole sources of data, and how do you sort of create a pipeline that the model runs really fast. So yes, what we covered is something really very important, which is understanding that data science is not a field in itself. It is all dependent on business, right? So if a business has money to spend on data science, then only you'll get a data science job, right? So remember that this is one of the very important questions people usually ask. What, they sort of pose you a question in the interview that my Instagram users are reducing. So what people, a person who has done a data science course usually jumps to is, we'll build these models to sort of increase your user base. Now that is not the approach you have to follow. You have to sort of boil down the problem from a business problem, which is my, uh, what do you say, my followers are reducing, to a data science problem, which can either be that my marketing spends are not really very well targeted, my sort of viewership is very poor, right? I'm not having the right type of people that they are gaining information. So various such analysis, various such informations can come up, right? So rightly approach the business problem, convert that to a data science problem, and then have further conversations in the interview. So we talked about all these roles that are there, right? Business analyst, data engineer, data scientist, machine learning engineer. Now I'll quickly move on to a quick algorithm, which is clustering, that can be used to solve the problem that I was talking about, right? Hmm. So Uh, remember, I talked about a lot of features, right, that you create to sort of build a model. Now, those features can be what is the sort of amount of transactions, whether the fraud transaction is of 2000, whether the fraud transaction is of 40,000, what is the value? The second thing can be what is the pin code where the transaction is happening, right? The third can be what is the gender, what is the age of the person who is getting defrauded, what is the details of the merchant, right? So various such data points are there which you can use as features, right? So all this sort of are plotted, if you can see on the screen. This is all obviously a 2D plot that I have shown, but suppose there are 20 features, then it becomes a 20D plot, which you cannot visualize, but you can definitely model. For simplicity purposes, I'm just saying, let's say we have two features, and you see that, there are certain set of transactions which are here, there are certain set of transactions which are here, and then there are certain set of transactions which are here. So you can see that there are three different clusters of data points that come in, right? So this is known as clustering, that you sort of try to group different transactions into different groups. So this is three different groups that we have created. Now, let's say you have a transaction that does not belong to either of these three groups, right? If you feel a transaction comes here, if you feel a transaction comes here or here, then you can say that, see, this is an anomaly. It's not belonging to any of these transactions, means there's something wrong with this transaction, and you sort of flag that as an anomaly or a fraud transaction. And the moment that is flagged, the phone banking officer calls you to verify whether you are the one doing the transaction or not. So I hope you understood. Clustering helps you sort of cluster transactions into different groups. And if there is a transaction that does not belong to any of these clusters, those become anomaly, and that gets flagged as a fraud transaction. This is one of the very simplest algorithm that we use to sort of create a fraud detection model. So you can see there are different such groups of transactions, right, that we made, and there are these data points, this one, which do not belong to any of the groups, and those sort of get flagged as fraud transactions. So very simple understanding of what fraud transaction is. ठीक है, अब चलते हैं. Let's sort of try to understand what मशीन लर्निंग इज. ठीक है, अभी तक हमने बेसिक एनालिसिस डिस्कस किया कि एनालाइज करके वी कैन से get insights, do visualizations and get insights. But machine learning model is a little different, right? It's something that's built on top of all the analysis that you do, right? So let's take a car, right? A self-driving car. So all of us might have sort of heard Tesla has autonomous driving. There is Waymo, which has autonomous cabs and things like that, right? So all of these, how did they learn? थोड़ा सा समझते हैं एकदम बहुत बेसिक तरीके से, ठीक है? So there is a car which you can see, it has multiple sensors. There is a lidar sensor on top of it. There is sensor in front of it. There is on the side. So ऐसे मतलब like there are 1,000 2,000 sensors that are sort of attached to a car, which we sort of analyze and build a model to sort of help it self-drive, right? Now, how does that happen? Let's just take three different sensors, which is left camera, center camera, and right camera. And suppose you want to teach the car how to sort of rotate, right? So what you do is you make a person sit in the car, right? And you deploy a model parallelly. So what is happening is whenever there is a rotation coming up, let's say I'm driving, the car is going on, and I have to take a left turn, right? And there is a person sitting, that person will take a left turn, right? Now let's say that the person takes a left turn and says that, so this is the person you can see here who is sort of rotating the wheel, and the angle at which it is rotating, that is also getting captured. So let's say there is a left turn that's coming up and the person rotates 40-degree, right, towards the left. Now there is a, like I said, a machine learning or a deep learning model running in parallel, which sort of also decides what is the sort of degrees of rotation. Now let's say it sort of says ki 42-degree rotate karna hai. So you can see that human has said 40, machine has said 42, right? There is a difference of 2 degrees, right? So what happens is this error, which is of 2 degrees, gets sent back to the machine learning model, right, as a feedback कि देखो भाई तुमने तो 2 डिग्री ज्यादा बोल दिया है, राइट? सो वो फीडबैक जैसे ही जाता है, तो नेक्स्ट टाइम जब आप टर्न करोगे तो उस फीडबैक को वो लेके सही प्रेडिक्ट करने की कोशिश करेगा. ऐसे दिस थिंग विल कीप गोइंग ऑन लाइक फॉर 2000 1 लाख टाइम्स. ऐसे रोटेट करोगे, मल्टीपल सच सिचुएशंस में रोटेशन करते जाओगे और फीडबैक देते जाओगे. दिस मॉडल देन विल एग्जैक्टली बी एबल टू प्रेडिक्ट हाउ मच टू रोटेट, right? So this is how the machine is learning. It takes feedback from what it has predicted and what the actual user would do, takes that as an error through a feedback loop. This is known as a feedback loop, and then keeps modifying its values, the parameters that the machine learning model is built on, so that it then predicts rightly for every future turn that has to take. So this is just one of the things that the particular car is learning. There are a lot of other things: how much acceleration to do, how much acceleration on a slope you should have, what is the speed you should have, at what speed, what brake mechanism should be there. So a lot of things have to be built within this self-driving car. We just took a very simple example of one of the things that we built, right? So this is what machine learning is in very basic terms, right? Now, itna samajh gaya apne ko? Now, I think one of the key things that you guys are waiting for is probably, you know, ऐसा और क्या बिजनेस प्रॉब्लम है, क्या डेटा साइंस प्रॉब्लम है जो सॉल्व होता है, एंड कैसे इनको क्रैक किया जाए. ठीक है? सो let's quickly move on to that, right? So we have like 5 different business problems that we are going to discuss about, right? So the first one is again around banking. You have given a loan out to a person, right? ऐसा हो सकता है कभी भी वो बंदा डिफॉल्ट कर गया, जैसे ही डिफॉल्ट कर गया बैंक का लॉस होगा. सो यू हैव टू सॉर्ट ऑफ डिसाइड कि looking at the details of that person, which is bank account, for example. मेरा सेविंग्स अकाउंट है, मेरी सेविंग्स अकाउंट में द person, the data scientist is seeing that my balance every month on month is reducing. अभी 30,000 था, नेक्स्ट मंथ 20 हो गया, फिर उसके बाद वाले मंथ में 10 हो गया. देन दैट इज एन इंडिकेशन कि भाई इस बंदे के पास पैसा नहीं है, तो ऐसा हो सकता है कि दिस पर्सन में डिफॉल्ट ऑन द लोन, राइट? सो वो सब एनालाइज करके यू बिल्ड अ मॉडल, एंड उससे ये पता चलता है कि हु इज गोइंग टू डिफॉल्ट, एंड उसको देन यू स्टार्ट पुशिंग, keep giving messages that your time has come to pay the EMI, or 10 days to go to pay the EMI. तो उससे क्या होता है कि the person feels कि अरे बैंक को तो पता है कि मेरे को लोन का EMI पे करना है, तो वो थोड़ा कॉन्शियस होके tries to get the money until the sort of timeline that is there to pay back the EMI, right? Every month जो timeline होता है, सपोज 10th तक है और तुम फर्स्ट को मैसेज डालोगे, तो 9 दिन है, वो बंदा कहीं से जुगाड़ के EMI पे करेगा, right? So that is one of the models you can build, which is predict which type of customers may default or may stop paying your EMI. The second is, all these FMCG companies, they are fast consumer products, right? They are fast consumer moving goods. So they get sort of consumed every 2-3 days, किसी भी शॉप में खत्म हो जाता है. तो हाउ डू यू प्रेडिक्ट कि किस शॉप में कितना जरूरत है, सो दैट आप उसके हिसाब से अपना प्रोडक्शन भी बनाओ, and production sort of happens at multiple places, right? So which place do you need to produce that, and in how much quantity, basis what is the sort of consumption in the different demographic areas. So that is the second type of forecasting price, or forecasting how much you need to produce, right, of ingredients. Second is, अगेन यहाँ पे अगर हम फोरकास्टिंग प्राइस ऑफ इंग्रेडिएंट्स देखें तो एशियन पेंट्स जो है, फॉर एग्जांपल, दे डेवलप पेंट्स, राइट, एंड पेंट्स में वन ऑफ द वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट ingredients is titanium oxide, and titanium oxide is very rare. It only sort of, not only, I would say, it usually comes with uranium. अब यूरेनियम के साथ आता है वो, तो naturally it goes into Department of Atomic Energy. So not everyone can sort of mine titanium oxide. They have to take permission from Department of Atomic Energy, and this in itself is very rare, finding uranium and titanium dioxide. सो कभी कभार ऐसा होता है कि उसका प्राइस बढ़ जाता है बहुत ही ज्यादा. So if you're able to forecast that its price is going to go up in the next 2-3 months, you will sort of try to get as much titanium oxide as much as possible now itself, right? So all those models can be built also, right? Now, the third type of model can be, let's say there is Tata Motors, you have, or General Motors, for example, they have a proper, you know, uh, chain where, the cars are getting manufactured. So there are some machines that sort of help fit the camera. There are some machines that help fit the sort of, क्या बोलते हैं, wheels and things like that, right? Chases, and chases के ऊपर सब कुछ add करना. Now, even if one step sort of goes bad, right, तो पूरा cycle रुक जाता है, production रुक जाता है, right? So if you're waiting for that machine to get faulty, right, then 2 या 3 days का मतलब आपके प्रोडक्शन ही रुक जाता है, एंड दैट इज अ लॉस टू यू, बिकॉज देन डिलीवरी स्लो हो जाता है, कस्टमर फिर बोलेगा यार इतना टाइम लग रहा है, तो मैं क्यों लूँ आपका ये कार, मैं किसी और से ले लूंगा जो मुझे जल्दी दे दे रहा है. So to solve that, you can do predictive maintenance essentially, because every sort of in that, automated pipeline, every sort of robot that is there, उसमें sensors लगे होते हैं. So if you use those sensors and try to sort of predict that, okay, this particular robot is sort of slowing down, और इसमें oil का problem हो रहा है, so we need to do a predictive maintenance. So you can sort of prevent that particular equipment or robot from shutting down and giving you 2 days of not productions of cars, right? So predictive maintenance उस तरीके से आप कर सकते हो, IoT sensors and वो सब लगा के you can analyze and preemptively is the word, predictive maintenance कर सकते हो, पहले से उसको solve कर सकते हो, वो problem issue आने ही मत दो कि वो खराब हो जाए. देन ये मेडिकल इमेजिंग तो सबने देखा ही होगा, एक्सरे और ये सब करके ब्रेस्ट कैंसर डिटेक्ट कर सकते हो, एंड देन व्हाट आर द इश्यूज विद द लंग्स एंड थिंग्स लाइक दैट. एंड वर्कफोर्स ऑप्टिमाइजेशन, सो दिस आई टॉक्ड अबाउट, जैसे फोन बैंकिंग डिपार्टमेंट का आई टॉक्ड, राइट, कि आई वाज एबल टू डिसाइड हाउ मेनी पीपल डू वी नीड टू स्टाफ. अब जैसे दिवाली का टाइम आ गया तो उधर पे बहुत ज्यादा लोग चाहिए, राइट? So predicting all of that, forecasting all of that is also one of the business use case and data science problems that you can solve, right? So let's move on to how to crack data science jobs. So before we do that, I just want to talk about my journey a bit, right? So uh, I started my journey in 2012. I joined IIT Bombay as a chemical, in the chemical engineering department, and सेकेंड ईयर तक मुझे पता चल गया यार केमिकल इंजीनियरिंग मेरे बस की बात नहीं है, मतलब मजा नहीं आ रहा उसमें, ठीक है. जेई में अपन सब क्या पढ़ते हैं, मैथ्स पढ़ते हैं, फिजिक्स पढ़ते हैं, तो उतना ज्यादा मैथ्स था नहीं, फिर दिख नहीं रहा था कि इतने सारे जॉब्स होंगे, हाई पेइंग जॉब्स होंगे. एंड फिर पैरेलली, आई थॉट कि कुछ और एक्सप्लोर करते हैं. इन कॉलेज में ये सब करने का बहुत टाइम रहता है, राइट? सो ये मेरा कॉलेज का फोटो है, राइट, जब मैं बच्चा था. एंड अभी जॉब वॉब के बाद थोड़ा मैं ज़्यादा खुश लग रहा हूँ, राइट? So that is all because I pursued data science and I'm sort of really interested. And abhi bhi matlab AI and all that, I keep exploring whatever new things come up. LLMs हैं, generative AI है, I'm up to date with almost everything, right? So second year में मुझे पता चला कि chemical engineering पसंद नहीं है, तो मैं थोड़ा ऐसे ही टीवी सीरीज देख रहा था, तो एक मेरे को पर्सन ऑफ इंटरेस्ट करके टीवी सीरीज लगा, दिखा, जो बहुत ही सही लगा. नाउ दैट इज सॉर्ट ऑफ क्रिएटेड बाय Jonathan Nolan, who is Christopher Nolan's brother, right? And it's a really good series. It talks about super AI and what is AI and उसमें क्या क्या कैसे कोई भी AI learn करता है. So that got me excited कि see, a machine can work like a human and even surpass humans, right? And that sort of felt कि यार अभी तो बहुत दूर है वो surpass human करने वाला phase, and now is the opportunity to get into this space. And what I felt is growing opportunity है, इसमें मैथ्स इन्वॉल्व होता है, डेटा साइंस में लाइक आई सेड डोमेन नॉलेज भी चाहिए होता है. सो इट इज अ कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ ऑल द थिंग्स दैट आई रिक्वायर, दैट आई वर्क विद द बिजनेस, तो बिजनेस नॉलेज भी आ जाएगा मेरे पास, फिर मैथ्स मेरे को पसंद है वो आ जाएगा मेरे को, राइट? एंड उसके बाद देयर इज एम्पल अमाउंट ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी, एम्पल नंबर ऑफ जॉब्स दैट आई कैन क्रैक, राइट? सो आई वोंट एवर बी जॉबलेस, राइट? सो ये सब सोच के आई डिसाइडेड कि इसको एक्सप्लोर करते हैं, एंड देन आई टुक अप अ जॉब इन आईसीआईसीआई बैंक एज अ डेटा एनालिस्ट, right? And post that, I sort of switched to upgrad, right? And that is what I'm doing as of now, right? And it has been a good journey because इसमें काफी कुछ सीखने को मिला है, right? From मैं जब आईसीआईसीआई बैंक में था, आई वाज वर्किंग विद आर. आजकल आर प्रोग्रामिंग तो कोई यूज करता ही नहीं है. फिर पाइथन आया, स्पार्क आया, राइट? एंड देन उसके बाद अभी पाइथन में देयर आर लॉट ऑफ एडवांसमेंट्स, एंड मशीन लर्निंग मॉडल्स में इतने सारे एडवांसमेंट हो गए, तो काफी कुछ सीखने को मिलता है. एंड यू कीप अप स्किलिंग, एंड द मोर यू कीप अप स्किलिंग, द हायर इज द सॉर्ट ऑफ सैलरी यू कैन डिमांड फ्रॉम द कंपनीज. अभी जैसे एवरी कंपनी इज ट्राइंग टू इंटीग्रेट जनरेटिव एआई टेक्नोलॉजीज. All the venture capitalists are sort of funding only those companies which are sort of innovating in this space, right? So this is a ever growing field, and I sort of had the right decision. All of you who are attending the session now, I hope you also make the right decision and take up something in data science, right? So let me just talk about how do you sort of, what is the usual interview process for a data analyst, right? So Abhi, you are in college. I don't know how many of you are in your third year and fourth year, but सबने इंटरव्यूज कुछ ना कुछ तो दिए होंगे, राइट? सो इंटरव्यू प्रोसेस थोड़ा ऐसा ही होता है. आई फर्स्ट टॉक अबाउट व्हाट वाज माय इंटरव्यू प्रोसेस, राइट? सो इट्स फर्स्ट, I had a aptitude test. It was a long 50 question test which you had to finish in like 25 minutes. Whoever was fast was able to do it. Then it was two rounds of interviews and then an interview with the general manager, right? So दो round of interview में, it was puzzles and things like that, right? And थोड़ा बहुत business problem solving था, that they asked कि इस problem को कैसे solve करोगे, right? And they didn't give me a data science problem, right? They gave me a business problem. What they were testing is कि उस business problem को कैसे data science problem में convert करोगे. So what we talked about, business problem of क्रेडिट कार्ड डिपार्टमेंट वाज कि लॉसेस हो रहे हैं, तो उस टाइप का एक प्रॉब्लम दिया था, एंड उसको कन्वर्टिंग इनटू अ फ्रॉड डिटेक्शन प्रॉब्लम, दैट वाज समथिंग दैट दे वर टेस्टिंग. And then the last round of interview which I told with was with GM. I still remember his name, Yom Upadhyay. So what he asked me is कि क्यों करना है डेटा साइंस. तो मैंने बताया कि भाई मेरा मैथ्स अच्छा है, मुझे इसमें पसंद आया, एंड देन मैंने एक्चुअली बताया कि मेरे को पर्सन ऑफ इंटरेस्ट से मोटिवेशन मिला था. And that probably might be a good thing or a bad thing, but I still feel if you have a very strong motivation कि क्यों करना है ये, क्यों डेटा साइंस में रहना है, that is going to get you through not just the interview but throughout your journey in the next 10-20 years that you're going to be in this space. You want to keep growing, you want to keep learning new things. That is where data science comes in, राइट? सो मेरे इंटरव्यू में तो काम कर गया. आई डोंट नो तुम्हारे इंटरव्यू में काम करेगा कि नहीं, बट यस. सो दिस वाज यूजुअली माय प्रोसेस. आजकल क्या होता है, देयर इज एन एप्टीट्यूड टेस्ट, बीच में सीक्वल और पाइथन के टेस्ट भी आ जाते हैं. मेरे टाइम पे वो सब नहीं होता था, बट अभी ये होता है. सो दैट इज समथिंग यू नीड टू प्रिपेयर फॉर. The third thing which I talked about is business problem solving, जो मुझे भी दिया था, अभी भी देते हैं, guesstimates देते हैं. So they try to understand how logical you are, how do you break down a bigger problem into a smaller problems and then come to final conclusion. And puzzles तो पूछते ही हैं उसमें, ठीक है. This is the process. Soft skill में HR questions, technical questions, project explanation. Now, when you're talking about projects, you have to use a framework that you sort of explain the project really well. Now, that framework can be a smart framework, right? Or context, action, result framework, where you give a proper context about the project that you did, what all things you did, and what was the result, राइट. सो ये सब चीजें होती हैं, जिस तरीके से आपको एक्सप्लेन करना होता है, तो वो सब चीजें सीखनी होती है आपको, ठीक है. एंड उसके पहले, अब ये सब तो मैंने इंटरव्यू के बारे में बता दिया, यू शुड गेट शॉर्ट लिस्टेड, यू गेट द टेस्ट एंड एवरीथिंग, बट शॉर्ट लिस्ट होने के लिए भी यू हैव टू गेट दीज थिंग्स रेडी, राइट. यू हैव टू हैव अ वेरी गुड रेज्यूमे दैट हाईलाइट्स योर प्रोफाइल, विच इज एसेंशियली गिटहब. उसमें दिखना चाहिए कैगल पे आपने क्या क्या किया है. कैगल इज वन वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टूल, आई वुड से, जिसको आपको मेंटेन करना चाहिए. वहां पे इफ यू बिकम अ मास्टर, ग्रैंड मास्टर तो बहुत दूर है, इवन इफ यू बिकम अ मास्टर इन एनी ऑफ द फोर थिंग्स दैट कैगल डज, वहां पे यू कैन सॉर्ट ऑफ resolve queries. Second, you can upload data sets, you can upload notebooks, you can participate in competitions. So either of these four, agar if you show yourself as a मास्टर मतलब उसमें होता है, अलग अलग लेवल होता है, नोविस होता है, एक्सपर्ट होता है, मास्टर होता है, ग्रैंड मास्टर होता है. So if you are a master in any of these four, you have a very good value in the eyes of the recruiter, because it's not easy. मतलब मेहनत करना पड़ता है and बहुत कुछ सीखना पड़ता है, but if you are able to do that, you do really well. मतलब शॉर्टलिस्ट तो ऐसे ही हो जाता है. फिर थोड़ा टैबलू डैशबोर्ड्स आप बनाओगे, वो सब दिखाना चाहिए, उसके लिंक्स होने चाहिए. फिर all these coding platforms, right? Either of these, if you're able to show that you are very good ranked in SQL or Python, then you sort of, are, among the top ones who get shortlisted, right? So resume बनाओ, LinkedIn बनाओ, and ये सब चीजें definitely highlight करना होता है, ठीक है. So the sort of courses that Upgrad runs, we focus a lot on all of these, whether it's an offline course or an online course. All of this are sort of there, that will be there in your resume once you complete a course for Upgrad. Okay, I hope this is clear. Let's quickly move on. What all things do you need to keep in mind while you are sort of, uh, you know, there in the interview? एक तो है कि फेंकना मत, ठीक है. एस्टिमेटेड गेस कर सकते हो, ठीक है, बट बी क्लियर कि दिस इज हाउ आई एम गेसिंग इट, मेरे को 100% कॉन्फिडेंस नहीं है, बट बिल्कुल भी फेंकना मत, सीधा आंसर मत दे देना ऐसे ही रैंडम कुछ भी, क्योंकि उससे पता चलता है कि बंदा सोच नहीं रहा है, ऐसे ही आंसर करने के लिए कुछ भी बोल दे रहा है. एंड इट्स ओके टू से इफ यू एंड एक्सेप्ट इफ यू डोंट नो समथिंग, ठीक है. एंड जो भी बिजनेस प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग वाले क्वेश्चंस होते हैं, कुछ भी होता है, आस्क क्लैरिफाइंग क्वेश्चंस, ठीक है, बिकॉज दैट हेल्प यू सॉल्व द प्रॉब्लम. पजल्स हो या फिर बिजनेस प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग का क्वेश्चन दिया हुआ हो, आस्क रेलेवेंट क्वेश्चंस एंड देन ओनली सॉर्ट ऑफ अटेम्प्ट इट. सीधा आंसर बिल्कुल भी मत देना. एंड इंटरव्यू व्हेन यू आर एंडिंग, try to ask something that is relevant to the role. Probably डेटा एनालिस्ट कौन कौन से प्रॉब्लम में काम करता है, कुछ अलुमनाई से बात कर लो, या जो भी उधर काम करते हैं उस कंपनी में, एंड टेल देम कि देखो मेरे को ये पता चला है, व्हिच वन विल आई बी वर्किंग ऑन. सो इट शोज इंटरेस्ट दैट यू आर एक्चुअली एक्सप्लोरिंग मोर देन व्हाट एन एवरेज इंडिविजुअल विल डू, राइट. So, yes, this is briefly what you have to do. Create a profile, right? Prepare for all these tests, improve your soft skills, and in the interview, ensure that you do not bluff at all. Ask questions and end the interview with motivation, showing that you're really interested in the role and really ready to do whatever is required. ठीक है. अब यहाँ तक तो हमने समझ लिया कि क्या क्या सीख सकते हैं, क्या सीखना चाहिए, कैसे प्रिपेयर करना चाहिए. बट ऑल ऑफ दिस इज लाइक, ठीक है, कोई कोर्स ले लेंगे, खुद कर लेंगे, हो जाए, ठीक है, बट फास्ट ट्रैक कैसे कर सकते हैं इस चीज को, एंड दैट इज व्हाट वी आर गोइंग टू क्विकली सॉर्ट ऑफ टच अपॉन. चैट जीपीटी तो सबने यूज किया होगा, कोई ना कोई टूल यूज किया होगा. सो अराउंड दैट ओनली कि कैसे अपन एक दूसरे कैसे फास्ट कर सकते हैं लर्निंग। ठीक है। सो ये इमेज में क्या फनी लग रहा है? इफ समवन इन द चैट कैन टॉक अबाउट दिस, बताओ क्या लग रहा है, इसमें क्या फनी है? एंड डू यू थिंक a generative AI tool like ChatGPT can talk and mention कि इसमें क्या फनी है? क्या लग रहा है, क्या लग रहा है? तो जब मैं ये इमेज देखा आई वाज लाइक यार ये तो सही है, मतलब मुझे लग रहा था कि दिस पर्टिकुलर चैट जीपीटी वोंट बी एबल टू से कि क्या फनी है इसमें। बट लेट्स सी व्हाट चैट जीपीटी सेज, राइट? लेट्स गो टू द नेक्स्ट स्लाइड। So ChatGPT says that this is a smartphone with a VGA connector. So उसको ये पता चलेगा कि there is a smartphone, there is VGA connector plugged into its charging port, right? And the humor, इसको ये भी पता चल गया कि humor क्या है, कि its absurdity is that it is getting plugged. This is an outdated VGA connector into a small charging port. ठीक है। उसको ये पता चल गया कि देखो यहाँ पे दो चीजें हैं, ये दोनों एक दूसरे से कनेक्टेड हैं बट गलत तरीके से कनेक्टेड है, एंड दैट इज द ह्यूमर। सो चैट जीपीटी इज नॉट जस्ट डूइंग टेक्स्ट, इट इज ऑल्सो अंडरस्टैंडिंग इमेज एंड व्हाट इज द रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द टू थिंग्स दैट इट फाउंड आउट इन द इमेज। दैट वाज माइंड बॉगलिंग टू मी। समझ रहे हो मतलब इतना माइंड बॉगलिंग था कि मैं वो वर्ड भी नहीं बोल पा रहा अभी सही से। सो या मतलब या देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ पोटेंशियल दैट्स देयर, एंड अभी हम जस्ट एक्सप्लोर ही कर रहे हैं कि कहाँ तक पहुंचे हैं, राइट? सो बहुत सारी चीजें इससे सॉल्व हो जाती हैं। जैसे ये इमेज है, यू मे फील दैट दिस इमेज इज ऑफ पर्टिकुलर सिटी बट दिस इज जनरेटेड बाय मिड जर्नी, राइट? एंड दिस इज द प्रॉम्प्ट दैट यू हैव टू गिव, right? A street photography of Kowloon, Hong Kong, which has all these things, neon signs, and उसमें कैमरा के जो भी फोटो के लेंसेज के जो भी चीजें हैं वो सब चीज भी लिख दो तो इट सॉर्ट ऑफ गेट्स यू ऑल दैट। So these are the parameters that Midjourney sort of understands and sort of generates the image. ठीक है, so the opportunity is pretty high. ठीक है। नाउ आई थॉट यार बचपन में हम सब स्नेक गेम खेलते थे, राइट? एंड आई फेल्ट कि स्नेक गेम तो खेलना चाहिए, राइट? एंड आई थॉट बचपन में मेरे से कभी हुआ नहीं, कभी स्नेक गेम बना नहीं पाया मैं। तो आई फेल्ट कि कैसे स्नेक खेल सकते हैं, तो मैंने सोचा एक गेम बना लेते हैं। मुझे बस पाइथन आता था, तो मैंने क्या किया, आई जस्ट टोल्ड कि यू नो चैट जीपीटी को मैंने बोला कि क्रिएट अ स्नेक गेम फॉर मी। ठीक है। तो उसने मेरे को कोड दे दिया। ठीक है। मैंने और उसने ये भी बताया मेरे को कि वो कोड कैसे सेव करना है। ठीक है। कहाँ पे सेव करना है, किस टाइप के फाइल में सेव करना है। एंड मैंने बस वही किया, एंड आई विल जस्ट शो यू कि वो स्नेक गेम कैसा दिखता है। सो गिव मी अ सेक व्हाइल आई एम लॉन्चिंग इट, विल जस्ट टेक अ मिनट और सो। सो अंटिल नाउ मजा आ रहा है लेक्चर में कि बोर हो रहा है? So I'm launching the Python game, the snake game that I had created. Let me just show it on the screen. So this is the game that just took me like 1 minute. I just put up a prompt and it sort of created this particular game for me. And let's just play this game for a while. सो ये येलो वाला है, आई हैव टू ईट दिस रेड थिंग। ठीक है। ओके। So this is the game that we used to play on our Nokia phones, right? So it was very interesting to me. अब देखो ये अचानक से मतलब मैं मरा नहीं फिर भी ये बंद हो गया। तो देखो मेरे लिए लेवल 1 चैट जीपीटी ने बना के दे दिया गेम। ठीक है। बट दैट वाज नॉट द परफेक्ट कोड, क्योंकि ऐसे एरर्स आ गए इसमें, अचानक से बंद हो गया। ठीक है, जबकि मैं मरा नहीं। सो ऑल दैट इज देयर। ठीक है, लेवल 1 तुम्हें चैट जीपीटी बना के दे देगा, बट यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड। अब जैसे इसको परफेक्ट करना है कि इस तरीके का एरर ना आए, देन आई नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि पाइथन कोड क्या है, कैसा है, उसमें क्या चेंजेस करूंगा दैट ये एरर नहीं आएगा। सो दैट इज व्हाट इज मेंट बाय फास्ट ट्रैकिंग योर लर्निंग यूजिंग जनरेटिव एआई। इसकी लेवल 1 वो तुम्हें सिखा देगा, बना के दे देगा। Now you just need to know that language and make edits to the existing code that ChatGPT has given to you and improve your projects, improve your learning multifold, right? एक और एग्जांपल मैं दिखाता हूँ। तो मैंने क्या किया था, ठीक है, कि आई सॉर्ट ऑफ created, I asked ChatGPT to create a login page for me. ठीक है, and let me just bring that up on the screen. Right. So, so I hope you guys can see the screen. तो मैंने उसको बोला यार चैट जीपीटी प्लीज क्रिएट अ लॉगिन पेज फॉर मी, तो उसने एक ऐसा पेज बना दिया। फिर मैंने बोला कि आई नीड इट टू बी समवेयर इन द सेंटर एंड थोड़ा मतलब ये सब बनाओ कि सेंटर में लेके आओ। तो उसने सेंटर में डाला, एक बैकग्राउंड बना दिया, बट यू कैन सी दैट देयर आर सम एरर्स कि ये इतना सुंदर नहीं दिख रहा बिकॉज इट्स सॉर्ट ऑफ स्ट्रेचिंग, एंड इसको फिर इसने छोटा कर दिया। फिर मैंने उसको बोला कि यार इसको और इम्प्रूव करो, सॉरी, इसको और इम्प्रूव करो, एंड जो ये इतना छोटू सा दिख रहा है, मेक इट सॉर्ट ऑफ एक्चुअली इन द सेंटर एंड अ बिट बिगर, राइट? सो उसने ऐसा कर दिया। ठीक है। एंड देन आई आस्क्ड इट टू सॉर्ट ऑफ क्रिएट अ मेन्यू टैब। मेन्यू उसको बोला था इधर लेफ्ट पे डालने के लिए, उसने बीच में डाल दिया, इस चीज को ऊपर मूव कर दिया। एंड देन आई टोल्ड इट टू ऐड अ बैकग्राउंड एंड मूव द मेन्यू, राइट? बट उसने नहीं किया, एंड इतना सा होम एंड कॉन्टैक्टर्स बना दिया, एंड ये लॉगिन पेज बना दिया, एंड बैकग्राउंड में एक लीव्स वाला डाल दिया। सो मैंने बस इंग्लिश में, इन इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज, आई सॉर्ट ऑफ गिव इंस्ट्रक्शन टू चैट जीपीटी, एंड उसने मेरे लिए ऐसे 5 पेजेस बना दिया, और मुझे बताया भी कि इसको सेव कैसे करना है। एक टेक्स्ट एडिटर खोलो, HTML फाइल बनाओ, एंड उसमें सेव करो। So the point that I'm trying to say is कि level 1 चीजें वो बना के दे देगा। Now if I have to edit this, I need to understand JavaScript and HTML and all that, right? So that is what is required now कि basic समझो अच्छे से, fast समझो, and keep building, क्योंकि when you build, right, you understand more कि क्या issues आ सकते हैं, कैसे और improve किया जा सकता है, and things like that, right? So that is the mantra that you guys should follow. That is, learn fast, use ChatGPT to learn fast, and use ChatGPT to build more, right? Learn more while you are building. अब जैसे you can ask questions within the code itself. अब JavaScript समझ लिया तो बोलोगे कि मेरे को ये JavaScript का कोड बताओ जिससे मैं ये चीज कर पाऊँ, and then try it out, experiment, right? So all that is something that is required for you to grow and sort of learn things faster. And that is what we do at Upgrad, right? So let me just close this up and go back to the PPT. In fact, uh, there is a code interpreter. I don't know how many of you have used it, right? But code interpreter is something that acts as a data analyst, right? So it sort of becomes your level 1 data analyst. So let me just show that to you also. So this is something that you get as part of premium features of ChatGPT. Let me zoom in. So what we did is we just told it कि use the CSV, the data set that is required to sort of analyze. And I told it, "Ki act as a data analyst, and your job is to analyze this Zomato data set." So I sort of gave it two instructions: provide a simple description and issues that you find in the data set. So it understood that data set. It sort of gave me what all columns are there, what is the meaning of those columns, and then further I asked it to sort of create graphs and stuff. So you can see there is a graph that is supposed to be here, but because this, it's saying image output is not supported in shared chat, but it sort of gave me a lot of analysis. Here is percentage of missing values in different columns, and then how do you treat those missing values? What could be the reasons of those missing values, right? And further analysis on, how many duplicate entries are there, how do you delete those, right? So it is able to do, part of the work that a data analyst does automatically. So you can see that data analyst is not just going to be a data analyst, it's going to be an AI powered data analyst. How do you make use of these AI tools to write codes faster, to help you sort of do preliminary analysis, build your initial product, and then move on to doing some more advanced stuff? So productivity enhancement is one of the very key features of this particular uh, era that you guys are in, and you should definitely get yourself up to speed, or else you will just get, uh, what do you say, left out, and then obviously salary and that all thing will happen, right? So let me just quickly talk about what is the potential impact. We are almost ending the session, and then we'll take some questions, right? So, what is the potential impact of generative AI and AI? So earlier, what McKinsey had estimated is that AI market would be like 11 to 17.7 trillion dollars, and that would sort of increase by, increase to like 13.6 to 22.1 in some, that would be, sorry, this would be the potential impact, right? Which is without generative AI. Now, with generative AI coming in, there are a lot of new use cases that would come in, and there was a lot of productivity enhancement. So, including all of this, the market of AI grew from 11.7 to 17.7 trillion to 17.1 to 25.6. That is roughly 35 to 70% increase in the market of AI. Now, what does that mean? That means that there is going to be a lot of revenue generated by these companies. And given there is a lot of revenue that is going to be generated, they'll need people to work on these technologies, develop these technologies. And hence, that is where a lot of jobs will be created, and a lot of people will have to upskill to improve their productivity, right? So these use cases, which is like 15 to 40% increment, there the jobs will be required, and this particular increment is going to be with productivity. So you need to know how to use these tools really well, and that is where there are certain skills that come in, like, uh, what do you say, prompt engineering, right, and things like that. Let's just quickly understand generative AI से किस किस का job risk पे जा सकता है, and which all fields you should not be in, right? And if you decide to be in certain field, if you need to sort of upskill or not, and how, right? So let me just show you. So if you see this color, which is there in dark blue, right? These are the set of jobs. So what this Goldman Sachs, which is one of the very big investment banking firms, right? They analyzed across all these roles that are there, which is building and grounds, legal, sales, and other such management, such roles. They analyzed like 200 tasks that each of those guys do in every sort of roles, and then decided which of those roles will have zero automation, which are showed in this blue, dark blue, which will have a complement of AI. So AI will be used to improve your productivity, right? So you'll use AI to do those tasks. And the second is which of those tasks will be completely done by AI, right? So those are the ones that you see in green here, green or gray, whatever it is. So you can see that maximum number of tasks in legal, in office and administrative support, some in life, physical and social sciences, some in architecture and engineering will be replaced by AI. You can see that a lot of them, all of them, almost in legal 40% is getting replaced, 60% is going to be aided with AI. So you need to get yourself upskilled if you are in legal to sort of do well in the Gen AI era, right? Similarly, if you're looking at technical, right, healthcare practitioners and technical, you have like 80% of more than 85% will be complemented by AI. So you need to know how to use AI in your job, right? Improve your productivity and everything, right? अब ये सब देखोगे जो installation maintenance है and all that production है ये सब में थोड़ा थोड़ा है, right? So not a lot of jobs will be affected here, but यहाँ पे everything will be affected by AI. So be very cautious when you're taking a decision कि किस industry में जाना है and किस domain में रहना है, ठीक है? Skills of an AI engineer, which obviously takes time to develop, but just for your knowledge, domain knowledge होना चाहिए. Prompt engineering होना चाहिए. Prompt engineering पे books लिखे गए हैं. That how do you sort of give the right instructions to the generative AI models that it does the right thing for you. So वो सब तुम्हें सीखना पड़ता है. Programming तो चाहिए and AI system design. So this is an advanced role जो you guys need not target now. You should start with a data analyst, be a data AI powered data analyst or a AI powered business analyst, right? And that is the target you guys should set to sort of get into this field and progress and be successful in the long run. Yeah, so this is all. These are all the jobs that you can find online, Hannah. And that is all from my end. We at Upgrad have launched an offline center, right? And I would definitely want to meet you guys. I'm going to be here this week, next week. Feel free to drop in. We can discuss on what sort of what sort of path we can chart for you, right? If you need to take up a course, if you do not need to take up a course, and how much time will it take for you to become an AI powered data analyst? Any questions before we drop off? So, guys, any question? My Instagram ID. Okay. Okay, yeah. I'm not really very active on Instagram, but sure, let me find it out what my Instagram ID is. Apart from that, any technical questions? Do visit the Upgrad Learning Center and have a conversation with me to get some clarity. It is Kaustubh underscore Singh underscore 30. Okay, guys, thank you for joining in and all the best. Do well. Bye bye.